My name is Lauren Parker. I'm 26 years old, and I just walked home from a 12-hour nursing shift to find my mother live streaming my entire life being thrown into a dumpster for the sake of a viral video. The smell of hospital-grade sanitizer lived under my fingernails. It didn't matter how many times I scrubbed my hands at the end of a 12-hour shift, the scent of bleach and latex was a second skin. I leaned my head against the cold window of my sedan, letting the engine idle in the driveway for a moment. My body felt like a heavy suit I was tired of wearing. All I wanted, all I had been dreaming about since the 4 a.m. rounds, was to peel off my scrubs, take a shower so hot it turned my skin pink, and crawl into the bed my dad had built for me when I was 16. It was a solid oak frame, heavy and smelling faintly of the cedar oil he used to polish it. It was the only place I felt safe since he passed away 2 years ago. "Just 20 steps to the front door, Lauren," I whispered to my reflection in the rearview mirror. My blonde hair was a frizzy mess, escaping the tight bun I'd pinned it into hours ago. My blue eyes looked washed out, rimmed with the red fatigue of the oncology ward. I killed the engine and stepped out. The evening air in our suburban cul-de-sac was thick and humid, smelling of freshly cut grass and, strangely, old dust. Crunch, crunch. I froze. That wasn't the sound of my sneakers on the pavement. I looked toward the front of the house. A massive, industrial-sized dumpster, painted a violent shade of crimson, sat squarely on the lawn, crushing the manicured sod my mother obsessed over. My heart did a slow, sickening roll in my chest. We weren't renovating. We didn't have the money for a dumpster. I was the one paying the mortgage. I would have known. Then a shadow crossed the upstairs balcony, my bedroom balcony. "Jax? Chloe?" I called out, my voice cracking with a sudden sharp spike of anxiety. A heavy black garbage bag flew over the railing. It hit the bottom of the metal. I burst through the front door, the screen door slamming against the siding with a crack like a gunshot. I expected chaos. I expected a burglary or a manic cleaning spree. Instead, I walked into a wall of blinding, artificial white light. The living room looked like a television studio. 2 massive ring lights stood on tripods, casting a clinical, shadowless glow over the hardwood floor. Wires snaked across the rug like black vines. In the center of the room stood my mother, Brenda. She looked perfect. Her hair was blown out into stiff golden waves, and she was wearing a silk blouse in a shade of approachable mauve. She was holding a stack of my sweaters, the hand-knitted ones my grandmother had made, and she was smiling at a lens with a look of practiced, saintly serenity. "And that, my loves, is how we release the weight of the past," Brenda crooned into the microphone clipped to her collar. "We don't hold on to things that no longer serve our journey toward light." "Mom?" My voice sounded like it belonged to a ghost. Chloe, my 19-year-old sister, didn't even look at me. She was hunched over a stabilizer, circling Mom like a shark, her eyes glued to the small monitor. "Keep going, Mom. The live count just hit 8,000. The heart emojis are flooding." "Mom, what are you doing?" I stepped into the light, my vision blurring. "I just saw Dad's guitar in a dumpster. Why is my stuff outside?" Jax, my younger brother, was sitting at the dining table behind a laptop. He gestured frantically for me to move. "Lauren, get out of the shot. You're ruining the frame. We're in the middle of the Purge and Surge event." Brenda didn't stop. She didn't even acknowledge me as her daughter. She turned her head slightly, giving her good profile to the camera, and let a single, solitary tear roll down her cheek. Sometimes, my loves, it's how we release the weight of the past, Brenda crooned into the microphone clipped to her collar. We don't hold on to things that no longer serve our journey toward light. Toxic energy? I whispered. I looked down at my scrubs, then back at the woman who had given birth to me. She was currently holding my nursing textbooks, the ones I had stayed up until 3 a.m. highlighting, the ones that represented the career currently keeping this roof over her head. She didn't even look at the titles. She just tossed them toward the door like they were literal garbage. "Stop it," I said, my voice gaining a sharp, jagged edge. "Mom, stop this right now." Brenda finally looked at me, but it wasn't the look of a mother. It was the look of a director whose lead actor had just forgotten their lines. She stayed in character, her voice a sickly sweet trill. "Oh, Lauren, darling, you're home early. Come, join the healing. Tell the Parker party how good it feels to finally be free of all this stuff." She gestured to the empty space where my life used to be. The heat from the ring lights was oppressive, a dry, buzzing warmth that made the sweat on my neck feel cold. I looked at the floor where my textbooks lay sprawled, their spines cracked, pages fluttering like wounded birds in the draft from the open door. "Healing?" I hissed. I stepped over a tangle of black cables, ignoring Jax's hiss of, "Watch the cord." I grabbed my mother's arm. Her skin felt like expensive parchment, smooth, cold, and entirely artificial. "This isn't healing, Mom. This is my life. Those books cost $400 each. That guitar was the last thing Dad touched before he—" "Lauren, honey, look at the lens," Brenda interrupted, her voice a terrifying mix of a whisper and a stage smile. She didn't pull away. Instead, she wrapped her arms around me in a restrictive, performative hug. "Tell them you're overwhelmed with gratitude. Tell them you're ready for the new Lauren brand we talked about." "There is no new Lauren brand." I shoved her back, harder than I intended. Brenda stumbled, her eyes widening in a way that looked perfectly tragic for the 8,000 people watching. She let out a small, dainty gasp and covered her mouth with a manicured hand. "Oh, the trauma is so deep," Brenda said to the camera, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "You see, my loves, this is why we must purge. The attachment to objects creates such violence in the spirit." "Are you kidding me?" I turned to Chloe, who was expertly panning the stabilizer to catch my breakdown from a more cinematic angle. "Chloe, stop filming. Help me get my stuff back inside before it rains." Chloe didn't even blink. Her eyes remained fixed on the tiny screen. "The chat loves the conflict, Lore. We just spiked to 10,000 viewers. Mom, mention the Symmetry Home sponsor now. The engagement is peaking." Jax tapped furiously on his laptop. "Sponsorship link is pinned. We're trending in the lifestyle category." I felt like I was drowning in a room full of people who were watching me sink and commenting on the ripple. These were my siblings. We used to build forts in the backyard. We used to hide under the covers together when Mom and Dad had their loud nights. Now they were directors in a movie where I was the unwilling villain. I spun around, looking at my room's doorway. It was empty. The dresser was gone. The vanity Dad had refinished for my 18th birthday was gone. "Where is the blue box, Mom?" I asked, my heart suddenly stilled by a terrifying thought. Brenda was busy adjusting her blouse, checking her reflection in the ring light. "What, the old jewelry box? It was tacky, Lauren. It didn't fit the coastal zen aesthetic I'm pivoting to for the spring season." "Not the jewelry box," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that felt like it could cut glass. The small ceramic urn, the one on my nightstand, the one with Dad's ashes. The room went silent, but only for a second. The only sound was the faint tink, tink, tink of the live chat notifications. Brenda's eyes flickered, a brief human moment of panic before the momfluencer mask snapped back into place. She glanced toward the balcony, then back at the camera. "We are releasing all anchors to the past today," she said, her voice rising in a practiced, inspirational crescendo. I didn't wait. The humidity of the night hit me like a wet towel, but I barely felt it. My sneakers skidded on the driveway gravel as I lunged toward the crimson wall of the dumpster. It stood there like a monolith of forgotten memories, smelling of dust, old wood, and the bitter scent of betrayal. "Dad!" I screamed, the word tearing at my throat. I didn't think about the height. I didn't think about my white nursing scrubs. I grabbed the cold, jagged edge of the metal bin and hauled myself up. My muscles protested, but adrenaline is a hell of a drug. I rolled over the rim and landed hard on something soft, a pile of my own bedding. The smell of my laundry detergent, something I'd always found comforting, now made me want to vomit. "Lauren, get down from there! You're being hysterical!" I looked back. Brenda had stepped onto the porch, framed by the warm glow of the foyer. Chloe was right beside her, the red light of the stabilizer glowing like a demonic eye in the dark. They were still filming. They were filming me scavenging through trash. "Where is it, Mom?" I shouted, my hands flying through the debris. I tossed aside a bag of old shoes, a broken desk lamp, and my favorite winter coat. "The blue box, Mom. Where is the urn?" "It's just an object, Lauren," Brenda called out, her voice projected for the microphone. "Release the attachment. Show the audience what it looks like to let go." The audience. I wanted to scream until my lungs gave out. I kept digging, my fingernails catching on splinters of wood, the remains of my bed. My breath was coming in ragged, shallow hitches. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely grip anything. And then I saw it. Tucked into a corner, partially covered by a heavy black bag of kitchen clutter, was a small sapphire blue velvet box. I knew that box. It held the ceramic urn Dad had chosen himself, a simple, hand-painted piece with a single gold leaf. "I see it," I whispered. I lunged for it, my knees scraping against the metal floor of the dumpster. Just as my fingers brushed the velvet, a heavy shadow loomed over me. "Don't touch that, Lauren," Jax's voice came from the rim of the dumpster. He was holding a second camera, pointing it straight down at me. "Mom wants the final purge to be on her terms. It's the climax of the stream." "Get that camera out of my face, Jax!" I lunged for the box, clutching it to my chest like a shield. I could feel the weight of the ceramic inside. It was cold. It was still. "The chat is peaking," Jax yelled back toward the porch, ignoring my sob. "We're at 15,000. They're arguing about whether Lauren is toxic or grieving. The engagement is off the charts." I sat there in the trash, cradling my father's ashes, and looked up at my brother. His face was illuminated by the blue light of the camera screen. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the numbers. At that moment, the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. My mother hadn't just made a mistake. She hadn't just been carried away by her brand. She had intentionally used the most painful moment of my life, the loss of my father and my home, as a hook. She had turned my grief into a content event. I wasn't a daughter to her anymore. I was a prop, and I was the only one in this family who wasn't for sale. "We're done," Brenda's voice rang out from the porch, her silk blouse fluttering in the breeze. She walked inside, her silhouette graceful and victorious. She thought the show was over. She thought she had won. My knees hit the gravel with a jarring thud as I climbed out of the dumpster, clutching the blue velvet box against my ribs. I didn't care about the scrapes or the dark grease stains ruining my expensive scrubs. The weight of the urn was the only thing keeping me anchored to the earth. I followed them inside. I didn't want a moment. I didn't want healing. I wanted to look my mother in the eye without a lens between us. The living room was still bathed in that artificial, buzzing white light. Brenda was standing by the dining table, taking a long, elegant sip from a glass of sparkling water. Chloe was checking her hair in a compact mirror, and Jax was hunched over the laptop, his brow furrowed. "That was gold, Mom," Chloe said, her voice dropping the sugary influencer tone she used for the camera. It was flat and clinical now. "The shot of Lauren in the dumpster? Pure engagement bait. We're going to have enough clips for 3 weeks of reels." "I know," Brenda sighed, leaning back against the table. She looked tired, but not the kind of tired I felt. Her exhaustion was the vanity of a performer. "But God, she's so dramatic. Did you see her face? She's becoming so unmarketable. All that crying and the nursing scrubs, it doesn't fit the aesthetic living vibe I'm building." I stood in the doorway, the shadows of the hallway hiding me. They thought the stream was over. Brenda had turned the monitor screen toward the wall, but I could see the glow of the laptop's power light from where I stood. "Mom, we need to talk about the Symmetry home contract," Jax muttered, his fingers flying across the keys. "They want a follow-up video of the empty house by tomorrow. We need Lauren out of those rooms so we can film the minimalist transition." Brenda waved a hand dismissively. "She'll leave. I've already contacted a stager. I never wanted her staying here anyway once your father passed. She's boring, Jax. She's not brand compatible. Every time I try to film a day in the life, she's coming home looking like a wreck from that hospital. It's depressing. It's literally killing my reach." A coldness, sharper than any winter wind, settled in my chest. "And the guitar?" Chloe asked, tossing her stabilizer onto the sofa. The comments were a bit split on that. Some people thought it was a bit much to toss an heirloom. Brenda let out a short, sharp laugh. "That guitar was junk. It was an eyesore. Your father had no taste for aesthetics. I'm finally going to be famous, and I won't let Lauren's grief or your father's dusty relics hold my channel back. People want to see success, Chloe. They want to see a woman who has cleared the clutter, both physical and emotional." I stepped into the light. Brenda didn't flinch. She just looked at me with a bored, expectant expression. "Oh, you're back. Put that box in the garage, Lauren. We're going out to celebrate the milestone. Jax, did you end the broadcast?" Jax's face was frozen. He wasn't looking at Mom. He was looking at the laptop screen, his eyes wide, his skin turning a sickly shade of gray. "Jax?" Mom asked, her voice sharpening. "Mom," Jax whispered, his voice trembling. "The monitor was off, but the stream, I never hit stop." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the buzzing of the ring lights seemed to die. I looked at the laptop. From my angle, I could see the corner of the screen. The silence in the room was so thick I could hear the high-pitched whine of the ring lights. Brenda's hand stayed frozen mid-air, her glass of sparkling water trembling. The approachable mauve of her blouse suddenly looked garish, like a costume that no longer fit. "Jax," Brenda whispering, the word barely a breath. "Turn it off. Turn it off now." Jax's fingers were a frantic blur on the keyboard, but in his panic, he fumbled. He knocked a can of energy drink over, the neon green liquid pooling under the laptop. The browser froze. It's not responding. I can't kill the feed." I walked toward the table. My legs felt heavy, but steady. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of the house that had been stolen from me over the last 2 hours. I didn't look at my mother. I looked at the screen. The chat wasn't just moving fast, it was exploding. At NurseLife99, I'm a nurse. We see this kind of elder and family abuse too often. This is disgusting. At Truth Seeker, unmarketable? She's your daughter, you monster. At symmetryhome.official, we are terminating our partnership with the Parker Party effective immediately. This does not align with our values. At Cancel Brenda, did she really just call her dead husband's things junk? Mom, Chloe gasped, her face pale as she read the comments over Jax's shoulder. The live count, it's at 30,000. People are sharing the link. It's going viral for the wrong reasons. Brenda finally snapped. She lunged for the laptop, pushing Jax aside. Give it to me. I'll fix it. I'll tell them it was a skit. We'll say it was a social experiment about the dangers of consumerism. She grabbed a laptop, but the green liquid had already seeped into the vents. The screen flickered, a jagged line of static cutting across her panicked face. Fix it? I asked. I finally looked at her. Her makeup was starting to run from the sweat of her panic, making her look like a melting wax figure. How do you fix the fact that you think I'm a burden because I don't fit your aesthetic? How do you fix throwing away Dad's ashes for a sponsorship? Lauren, shut up, Brenda screamed, dropping the sweet mom voice entirely. It was a jagged, ugly sound. You're ruining everything. I worked for years to build this. You're just a nurse. You don't understand what it takes to be someone. I didn't scream back. I didn't have to. I simply reached out and tilted the laptop's camera upward so it captured her full, unedited rage. I'm just a nurse? I repeated quietly. The person who pays the mortgage. The person who took care of Dad while you were busy filming grief vlogs. The person who is currently holding the only thing of his you didn't manage to sell or destroy. I held the blue velvet box up to the lens. Look at it, Brenda. I used her name for the first time in my life. This is what a real anchor looks like. It's not clutter, it's love. And you wouldn't know the difference if it hit you in the face. The darkness was thick, smelling of ozone and fried electronics. For a moment, none of us moved. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. The kind of silence that happens right after a car crash when the dust hasn't settled yet. My followers, Brenda whispered. I heard her fingernails scratching at the plastic casing of the dead laptop. The sponsors. Jax, get the backup phone. We have to go live. We have to tell them it was a prank, a parody of cancel culture. Mom, stop. Jax's voice came from the shadows, sounding smaller than I'd ever heard it. The chat, I saw the numbers before it died. It wasn't just fans. Local news accounts were tagging the police. People saw the address on the Symmetry home shipping labels on the table. I don't care, Brenda shrieked. A match flared. She had found a candle. The flickering orange light made her shadow dance like a monster against the wall. This is my house. This is my life. Actually, I said, my voice steady as I clutched the urn to my chest, this is the house I've been paying for, and it's not a set anymore. A flash of light cut through the living room windows, sweeping across the walls, then another and another. The sound of car engines humming filled the driveway. At first, I thought it was the police, but there were no sirens. I walked to the front door and stepped out onto the porch. The street was lined with cars. People were getting out, neighbors I hadn't spoken to in months, and strangers holding their phones out. But they weren't filming for clout. A woman in her 50s wearing a faded sweatshirt walked up the driveway. She looked at the dumpster, then at me. I saw the stream, she said, her voice trembling with indignation. I live 3 streets over. My husband and I, we couldn't just sit there and watch her do that to you. Behind her, a group of young men, probably college students, headed straight for the dumpster. "Which stuff is yours, miss?" one of them asked, rolling up his sleeves. "We're getting it out. All of it." "Lauren!" Brenda marched onto the porch. the candle in her hand shaking. "This is private property. You're trespassing." "They're not trespassing, Mom," I said, turning to face her. "They're helping me move." The next hour was a blur of motion. It was the opposite of the Parker Party production. There were no ring lights, no scripts, and no fake tears. Just the sound of heavy lifting and the quiet, respectful murmurs of strangers. They formed a human chain, passing my belongings out of the crimson metal bin. My dresser, scratched but whole. My nursing textbooks, wiped clean of dust. My father's guitar, which the woman in the sweatshirt held as if it were made of glass. Brenda stood on the porch, a fading queen in a mauve blouse, screaming at the dark. She tried to film them with her phone, but every time she pointed the lens, people simply turned their backs. They denied her the one thing she lived for, an audience. As the last of my boxes was loaded into the back of a neighbor's pickup truck, the woman in the sweatshirt handed me a small folded piece of paper. "It's my daughter's Airbnb. It's empty for the week. Go there. Get some sleep, Lauren. You've done enough healing for one." The Airbnb was a small, saltbox cottage on the edge of town, tucked away behind a veil of weeping willows. It was the quietest place I had ever been. There were no ring lights buzzing, no fans whirring, and most importantly, no one was performing. I sat on the floor of the spare bedroom, surrounded by the boxes the neighbors had helped me save. It was a strange collection, a life dismantled and shoved into cardboard. My nursing textbooks were stacked haphazardly. My winter coats smelled like the dumpster's metallic tang, and my father's 1974 Gibson leaned against the wall, its neck scarred but unbroken. My phone, which had been buzzing incessantly in my pocket, felt like a live wire. I finally pulled it out. The internet had done what the internet does. The Parker Party was no longer a brand, it was a crime scene. Clips of the hot mic moment were everywhere, reposted, analyzed, and mocked. Brenda had tried to post an apology video an hour ago, but even in the thumbnail, you could see she was wearing a new shade of remorseful lipstick. The comments were brutal. Her follower count was dropping by the thousands every minute. I didn't feel joy watching her collapse. I just felt a profound sense of relief that I was no longer the scaffolding holding up her house of cards. I deleted the app. The screen went black, reflecting my own face. I looked tired, yes. My blonde hair was matted with dust, and there was a smudge of grease on my cheek. But for the first time in years, I didn't look like a prop. I looked like Lauren. I reached for the blue velvet box sitting on the nightstand. I opened it and ran my fingers over the cool, smooth ceramic of the urn. "We're out, Thad," I whispered. "It's just us now." I picked up the guitar. My fingers found the familiar frets, the wood feeling warm against my palms. It was out of tune. The strings had been loosened by the impact of the fall. I spent the next 20 minutes slowly, methodically turning the pegs. E, A, D, G, B, E. Each note was a small, resonant victory over the chaos. I struck a chord. The sound filled the small room, rich and deep, vibrating in my chest. It wasn't content, it wasn't aesthetic, it was just music. A week later, I signed the lease on a small apartment closer to the hospital. It didn't have a balcony or a coastal zen kitchen. It had mismatched floors and a window that looked out over a small park. I hadn't answered any of Brenda's frantic texts about the mortgage or Chloe's guilt-tripping DMs about family loyalty. I had blocked their numbers, not out of malice, but out of necessity. You can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. On my first night in the new place, I didn't film a moving in vlog. I didn't take a photo of my dinner to prove I was happy. I simply sat by the window with a cup of tea and watched